So just interesting, while we're waiting for everybody else to get here, if they're still on their way. Two contrasting thoughts about a year apart from you recognize these fellows? Yes? My wife said you guys would recognize them. I said, oh, come on, everybody knows the Beatles. But that's in their suit and tie era, 1963. But interesting, what do you make of the shift? So in 63, I want money. And in 64, I don't care too much for money. What do you suppose happened in a year's time that changed? So maybe, right, it's that in a year's time, they had all the money, they had more money than they could have dreamed maybe of having. And maybe how did this become apparent to them then? So now you got lots of money. Are you happy? This is what's disillusioning for people when they become wealthy, right? Is that it doesn't seem to satisfy what they look for, what they want most. Have you done any read any of the history of people that win the lottery? Yeah, Parker, what happens when people win the lottery?
Well, most of the time they blow it and end up where they were before, but you can also win the lottery and still be stuck in the same mental position as you were before. And it might even be worse because you're shocked now at all the things that you have access to. And you can do lots more things that you wouldn't before.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an internal culture shock, I guess.
Yeah, sure. Right. There's some articles written about the incidence of divorce among people that win the lottery. So lots of times, lots of money makes people realize how different they are from each other rather than a common challenge that they face together, work together, same thing in a family sort of a thing. Just interesting. We do live in a culture though that sort of teases you with the idea that money could fix everything. Yes, we kind of live in that sort of a culture. Governmentally speaking, we throw a lot of money at things. Yes, and they're not necessarily getting better. Education is one of those kinds of things. But anyway, so today we're starting with the temptations of Jesus. And so temptation wise, it is tempting to live your life in the pursuit of, by way of money, because that can get me what I want. Okay, good. Let's begin. Dear Father in heaven, thank you for the blessings of this day, especially for the life of your Son, who lived his on behalf of ours as a substitute for us under the law, to redeem us from the curse of the law. So always doing what is the best thing to do on our behalf, and always absorbing into himself suffering the consequences of when we do the worst things. And so has restored our lives to us, have redeemed us from the curse of the law, and even now through every moment of our life means to restore our life to us in the fullest sense of the word. A life that's free of concerns for self, especially for money's role in that, but instead looks outward to the life and health and well-being of everyone around us. So bless us in this pursuit of life as you intended us to know it, by way of the Gospel of Luke, for Jesus' sake. Amen. I always forget to send this around. Almost always. So, so why temptations at all? Maybe a good way to answer that question is, or has to do with, you know what helicopter parents are? Yes? You think that's a good idea, helicopter parents? No? Savannah, why no? It's annoying. So that's from the kid's side, Gil.
Why it's not a good idea?
Yeah.
Well, it doesn't let your kid flourish, I guess, they can't learn things on their own.
Why not?
Well, they're on them all the time about not making mistakes, and they can't learn from those mistakes.
Yeah, okay. So there's a certain fear factor involved. What happens to the life of my kid if I'm not there to protect it? Angela?
I work with kids and we teach kids medicine, so parents are obviously very nervous and hesitant, kind of be very present when that happens. But especially with kids coming out of COVID, it can worsen children's anxiety after parents often that face as their childhood.
Yeah, right. And is it possible just to be sympathetic to start with, right? In this worldview where there's just time and just a body, would that help explain why parents are so nervous about their children? Like if I lose this kid, that's it, it's over. Now I'm gonna lament that the rest of my life, and that may be a long time. So super nervous about that sort of a thing. And is that kind of a principle that there's a cause and effect? The more I disorient maybe to collapsing all life into this moment with my kid, the more what I want is actually given away from me. So for example, my parents wanted all of my sisters and brothers and me to learn how to swim. Why? So because they like to go to the bodies of water and they didn't want to spend all their time doing what? Worrying about us, right? In the water. And so and they had somebody else, they dropped us off. They didn't go in with us because their assumption was the person that's doing the teaching is the best person to have in the water with my kid. Yeah. Yeah. I tried to teach all of my kids how to downhill snow ski. Raise your hand if you don't know what snow is. Okay, and it didn't work. Why not? Because I'm not a ski instructor. I don't actually know how you actually teach that. I know how to ski, but I don't know how to teach. So it's like I'm talking Russian to them or something. There, look at me. So I hired a person to do that for me, and then I went away. Right? Children are nervous about making mistakes in front of their parents, right? Or about failing, so then things get really constricted here. And that's worse, right? That's worse than the alternative. Okay. So what does God do in the beginning and going forward? It's not this kind of a structure for our lives, it's this kind of a structure for our lives. And he can do it because there's two lives going on. So God puts us in a body so that we can be free to, what Gil said, you can be free to make mistakes. So maybe you've had this experience. You can teach a child, right? Don't touch the stove because it's hot. And at some point though, you just have to let it go. Yes. Can't stand between you and the stove the rest of my life. So you're going to have, I told you, kind of a thing. And so there's a sort of a responsibility here. So God says, this is how creation works. This is what ruins creation. Okay, ready, go. Well, it was the temptation was going to come. That's part of being made in the image of God, is that we have the capacity to think thoughts beyond ourselves. So I wonder what the animal kingdom would look like, right? If giraffes could try to be cheetahs, right? What would that? How would nature go if the animals decided that they wanted to be something different than they are instead of be what they are? But humans actually have that capacity. I think they'd like to be something different. One more question. Do you think that being more aware of the lives of more other people in more detail, including photographs and videos, is helping human beings be more appreciative of how they're constructed or less appreciative? You know what I mean? So the more people, you don't Chase, okay. So Chase, I see all these people on Instagram and they look smarter than me, they look healthier than me, they look happier than me, they're doing all sorts of stuff I'm not doing. So am I feeling better about my situation or worse? Even though I have a lot to be grateful for. I don't have a bad situation, but by comparison, now I'm dissatisfied. It's problematic. Is capitalism trying to take advantage of that by showing you what other people are buying when you're trying to buy something else? So there it is, the temptation to want something other than what's already near you. And books are written about this, fiction, and films are made about this, of coming to accept where you are and who you are, rather than lamenting that you are not somewhere else or someone else. So let's see how it goes here. So we're at Luke 4, and we're starting with verse 1. So remember that Jesus is living every human being's life in the place of every human being, from conception to ascension into everlasting paradise. So Matthew, Mark, Luke, chapter 4.
Jesus, full of the Holy Spirit.
I knew God was in the room, I knew it. No problem. You there, Tammy? 4 verse 1. Okay.
Full of the Holy Spirit, returned to the Jordan and was led by the Spirit into the wilderness.
Okay, notice who's leading Jesus there. So it's not that God, Jesus, or Holy Spirit are not in control. It's precisely because they're in control that God wants Jesus to endure every temptation in our stead and to show us the significance of that. Parker, verse 2.
Where for 40 days he was tempted by the devil. He ate nothing during those days, and at the end of them, he was hungry.
And do you know the reason for that, Parker? Why Jesus didn't eat during those 40 days and nights?
That would probably increase your temptation.
To make it even harder. Yes? So Jesus is always going to be taking our place in the worst of all possible circumstances. So one example of that that's often missed in the narrative is when Jesus was being crucified, they offered him this thing called gall to drink. Most people don't know what that is, but it's what's the word, analgesic. It's sort of like morphine of the ancient world. It's there to dull your sensation of pain. So that was some small measure of mercy that the executioners had on the executed. Okay, but Jesus refused it. So just going to take all of this on straight up, full on, no advantages like we might know. Okay, Ross, verse 3.
The devil said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command this stone to become bread."
Julie.
And Jesus answered him, "It is written, man shall not live by bread alone."
Grace.
And the devil took him up and showed him all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time.
Yeah, Melanie.
And he said to him, "I will give you all their authority and splendor. It has been given to me, and I can give it to anyone I want to.
Angela.
If you worship me, you will all be yours."
Xavier.
And Jesus answered him, "It is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve."
Andrea.
Then he brought him to Jerusalem, set him on the pinnacle of the temple, and said to him, "If you're the Son of God, throw yourself down from here.
Gail.
For it is written, he will command his angels concerning you to guard you.
And on their hands they will bear you up, lest you strike your foot against the stone.
No.
And these answers are going to say, "You shall not put the Lord your God to rest."
Sunny.
And when the devil had handed every temptation departed from him until an opportune.
Yes, an opportune time. Anybody know what that time was? Left Jesus for an opportune time. I'm sorry, Bill? Oh, Christian? The daytime? Well, this was daytime too. Think about an opportunity, go.
The garden.
Garden of Gethsemane, where the devil found an opportunity for having Jesus arrested, and then eventually, that all happened overnight, right? So by the time the crowds picked up what was going on, the momentum was going in the other direction towards the crucifixion, yes? Now, here's a what if kind of a moment. Okay, we know from the 4 Gospels that while Judas Iscariot was functioning like an apostle of Jesus, he had responsibility for the treasury, so to speak, and he was taking what was in it. That's a really important detail, because what's going on with Judas Iscariot as he's walking with Jesus for 3.5 years, and he's seeing Jesus feed hungry people and heal sick people and raise dead people and forgive the sins of people to relieve their guilt, and defending defenseless people. Why would you be taking money out of the treasury while all that's happening? So it's not just that you're weak, it's more of a premeditated, it's more of, this is starting to get away from him, right? He's moving in this direction, even though he's living in this kind of an environment. Is it possible that when Judas Iscariot's taking for himself what's in the common treasury, that the devil notices this? Here's my way in. is it possible that that's what happened way back in Genesis? That when Adam told Eve, and you can't touch the fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that the devil saw that as his way in. See, this is how I drive a wedge between people and God. Okay, why are we talking about it? Oh yeah, for a more opportune time. So the opportune time came when he realized there was an apostle who could lead to the execution of Jesus. Matthew's order he gives these same three samples of temptations, but his order is different. In Matthew, the kingdoms come last, and the putting him on the top of the temple comes second. Luke happens this way, but the thing to remember is these temptations took place over 40 days and nights. So it's not unthinkable that the devil is tempting Jesus with the same temptation. Have you ever experienced the same temptation more than once? In the same evening, same time frame? Yeah, it happened to me last night. I know that I'm not supposed to have snacks after dinner. I was doing really good until I made my wife a bowl of popcorn, and then the barn door was open. Then it was these new kind of crackers I found at Ralph's, and then from crackers was not good for you to nuts that are good for you, but I'm not supposed to be doing any of this. And I had hung in there for like 6 rounds of, hey, let's get some snacks. And then I wiped out. Okay, but each of them has a reason for the order that they're using. How does Jesus deal in the same way to each temptation? Did you notice that? The beginning of Jesus' response to each temptation is the same. What's he say? You can look if you want. And said, it is written. Now, you can't tell it necessarily in English translation, but there's a perfect tense in Greek. And so the point of using that tense for a verb is that this is something that has happened in the past, that it has enduring consequences. So when truth is articulated, so somebody might have written that down, and it remains true, always going to be true. So that the solution for temptation is truth. That shouldn't be a surprise, so it should. Right? So if you were tempted, well, I don't want to get into that. Okay, so notice the devil begins his temptations with this every time, yes? Do you think that there's a question in Jesus' mind whether he is the Son of God or not? Not likely. That's not actually what's in play, but that's where the devil's level of thinking about things. Why? Because what does the devil want to be? God, but he's not, and so he's trying to destroy what it is for God to be God, so that he actually is in control and God's not in control. The real temptation is if you're hungry. So hunger can get to people, yes. It can make people do what they wouldn't do otherwise. You know the story about the French Revolution and Marie Antoinette, correct? When she said, let them eat cake, she wasn't opening the bakeries, right? She was saying, she was just being really cruel in that kind of a statement. If the people don't have bread, and then you get the French Revolution out of that. Okay, what's significant about Jesus' answer? Yeah, so what if you are hungry? And I don't know what it's like to be hungry for 40 days and 40 nights. I know that Gandhi did. If you know his life, I think that's one of his ways of this kind of approach to things. Let me just show you how important this is. I'm not going to eat until we make some progress on this subject. Okay, Jesus' answer? Is hunger the worst thing that can happen to you? Are there people that do their work and ignore their hunger because of the significance of the work? Right? So do you suppose surgical teams that are doing heart transplants stop in the middle of it? Here you go. Grace is going to be hungry sometime in the future. You got to stick with this thing. Firefighters, right? Military operations, hunger's not really where we're living, right? Really interesting. You should, if you like this sort of a thing, to read the memoirs of Ulysses S. Grant. I never would have believed that he was so articulate, and that he was so articulate with his opposition to slavery in America, his motivation behind that. And what is particularly interested in is that when the conclusion of the Civil War was in view, the troops that were making that progress had already been without food for 3 days. And so the commanders were pretty worried about that. Like, we should probably let them take a break. It's the troops that said, we don't want to break. Right, Garrett? This is we can do this. So we don't want to let up. We want to finish this thing now because we want to put an end to it, sort of a thing. So Jesus' answer, man does not live by bread alone. Right? First of all, your life is a product of God, and if God created your life and cares about your life, then you must know what you need and when you need it, so it'll be okay. And remember, the essence of your life is in a soul that doesn't eat whole wheat or rye. It's filled in its relationship with God and how God provides for it, right? And another evidence of that, have you ever lost your appetite over something that's not physical in nature? It's something relational in nature, yes? Lost love or grief over someone's situation or condition. Okay, so we know that there are more important things than just health. So Jesus sort of moves us past that level of physical hunger. What if you are uncared for? So he puts Jesus in peril artificially. He takes him to the pinnacle of the temple and says, if you're the Son of God, throw yourself down. Why? Because you're going to prove that if God really cares for you, he wouldn't let you do what? End your life, correct? Except the devil's, again, collapsed into this worldview. So what if this life goes splat or dies by some other means? That's a release, not the end. That's the fullness of this life coming to experience, rather than in competition with this life that's against it. Okay. So, but why challenge God at that level? If God makes my heart beat, why would I think that he doesn't care if my life is in peril? Okay, and last of all, of a kingdom. Did you hear in what the devil said something that doesn't sound quite right? So the devil shows Jesus all the kingdoms of the world in a moment of time, and he says, I'll give them all to you if you'll fall down and worship me. Do you believe that? Do you think the devil would really give Jesus everything if he would worship him? No. Sonny, tell us what you think. What would happen?
I mean, I was just shaking my head out. It's so true.
Well, think about drug dealers. Don't they promise people that they could have a greater experience than they're having now? Take what I'm selling, yes? Is that really to liberate the person who's looking for a better experience, or is it to enslave them? So they promise you one thing that's actually going to do the opposite of what they're claiming to do, right? That's how this world works. It's the sleight of hand sort of a thing. And so, and then the devil also says, for all these kingdoms have been given to me, and I give them to whoever I want. Now, maybe there's a level of truth in that, yes, that the devil has power to do certain things, but that's still happening within a greater oversight by God that makes sure those things work for good and not for ill. Just an archaeological note. Oh, by the way, yeah, sorry, forgot about this slide. Why 40 days and 40 nights? What's the matter with 30?
Isn't it it's like the number 3 or 7, it's like a perfect number.
Yeah, perfect number. That's good. I'm thanks for saying it like that, Gil, because in the end, all the numbers become perfect, and I still don't know what they mean. But that's very common. I hear that all the time. So numbers in the Bible have significance, just like they do in our language, right? What's that? What's it worth? Okay, now how the Greek letter, and it's P, by the way, not pi, right? Elemental pi, that's not how we say the alphabet. Okay, but it has to do with circles. Yes, area of circles, distance around a circle, that sort of a thing. Okay, it's just been assigned to this as a shortcut, right, to talking about what's going, maybe it's because it's pie shape, I don't know, pies are round. But same thing's going on in the Bible and in nature. How many gods? According to the Bible, one. Certainty. Does it matter that we have two eyes that work in harmony with each other? What does that allow us to do? We live one eye. It's a problem because you lose your sense of right depth perception. So it lets you see 3D. Okay, so in the Bible, you're not allowed to condemn anyone on the testimony of how many witnesses? Just one. You have to have at least two witnesses. Why? Because then we could expose if someone was lying by separating them and comparing their stories. Remember that Pharaoh had two dreams. One was about thin and fat cows, and one was about thin and fat ears of grain. And Joseph says it's the same dream. I gave it to you twice because the thing is certain. 3, how many persons within God's nature? 3, 4, how many corners of the earth? A perceptive answer, right? In poetry and love music, how many corners of the earth? How many points on the compass? 4. Okay, so, right, Zariel, I would follow you to the ends of the earth, right? Zariel swoons. No, Zariel says, get real, man, there's no ends of the earth. You could chase me around the planet, but so we make exceptions for. If you look on the Weather Channel, will it tell you what time the sun is going to rise tomorrow? But it doesn't. The earth is turning. Sun's not moving, the earth is turning. But we accept that, yes, by way of perception, kinds of things. So the horizon historically was understood to be the edge of the earth, even though it's moving as you go. Okay, 10, how many commandments? 10. Okay, what do the 10 commandments articulate? What is required to live in creation without death over the course of your physical life? So what it takes to live and not die, 10, articulated in 10 commandments, laws. 4 is the number of your life in this world. So 40 has to do with what it takes to live during the course of life in this world, whether you live to be a week old or whether you live to be 100 years old. That's the term that's used to describe the course of your life in the world. So what's Jesus doing? He is fulfilling, he's going through the course of your life in this world under the assault of temptations and always succeeding. And then he's going to make that yours. That's part of this atonement thing. So when God's looking at you, he never sees you fail when it comes to temptation. He always sees you succeed. And how does Jesus see you when you fail? He sees you the way a lifeguard sees a drowning person, yes? Comes alongside of you and makes his strength your strength. So you move forward. Okay. Questions about temptations and 40 days and nights and all that sort of thing. Okay. So here's interesting artist conception. So the devil is offering, turn this bread, this rock into bread. Jesus is not, thanks. Notice what the artist put in. You know what that is? Anybody? It's a rosary. Interesting, isn't it? So here's an artist that has some issues with Roman Catholicism. Probably not with Catholicism itself, but Roman Catholicism. Notice how the devil is dressed in a monk's habit, so to speak. Okay. Now here's a picture of a drawing of Jerusalem in the 1st century. So here's the temple precinct, the temple itself. Here's a bridge across the Kidron Valley. The Mount of Olives is here. So you can look across and see the temple precinct. This is the Kidron Valley, and down in here is the Garden of Gethsemane. We'll get to that later, right, where Jesus is betrayed. This is sort of the Newport Beach of Jerusalem. This is where the wealthy people live. And this is the Fortress Antonia. right? So when you read the narrative about movements between, for example, when Jesus was on trial with Pontius Pilate, and he sends Jesus to Herod, hoping to get this off of his hands, and then Herod checks Jesus out and sends him back. They were actually both living, where'd it go? Right here. Okay, so there's a citadel here. It's there to this day. You can visit it. And so Pontius Pilate's palace was at this end. There's kind of a mall in between with a pool. And at the other end was Herod's palace. So it wasn't like they had to go across town to do this back and forth thing. They were all right just there. This is where the soldiers are, Roman soldiers. Notice its proximity to the temple. Because if we're going to have riots in Jerusalem, chances are they're going to start where? At the religious center of things. So we want the soldiers to be right there. This is the hippodrome that was there in those days. So why am I showing you that? Because people have wondered how dangerous this really was for the devil to take Jesus to the pinnacle of the temple and have him jump down. Okay, like that's not really life-threatening. I mean, you might break a leg, but not deadly. So presumably the pinnacle of the temple right here, the highest point of the temple. This is a picture I took from across the Kidron Valley from Mount Olive. That place that you saw before is right here. I'm sorry, that's the Dome of the Rock now because the temple's gone, but here's the corner of that temple precinct. Here it is again. This is now by somebody else's photography. And here it is looking down. That's not a very good picture. Here it is looking up from below. I'm showing you this because when they were doing these excavations, they found a stone down here in the pile of stones that fit right there and it had an inscription on it. And the inscription was the pinnacle of the temple. So this is where archaeology becomes important in clarifying some assumptions that we've made. So you would assume that the pinnacle of the temple was the temple building itself and the high point of it, but what you find out in archaeology is no, it was a place on the Temple Mount that was the highest place above the surrounding area. You would not survive a fall from that location. So just a little archaeology here. Okay, so Jesus comes back from the wilderness. He enters into his own hometown. So he's back up north in Galilee of the Gentiles. But there are synagogues there because there is a Jewish population there. So he goes into the synagogue of the town where he grew up. And let's pick up the text at 4:17. Let's see, Danielle, you read. Sonny read. Yes, please, Catalina.
And the scroll of the prophet Isaiah was given to him. He unrolled the scroll and found his place for inscription.
The Spirit of the Lord is upon me because he has anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim liberty to the captives and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed.
To proclaim the year of the Lord's favor.
Case 4:20.
And he rolled up the scroll and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of all in the synagogue were fixed on him.
And he began to say that today the scripture has been fulfilled in the earth.
All spoke well and marveled at the gracious words that were coming from his mouth. And they said, "Is not this Joseph's son?"
Good. And Priscilla, do you think when they say, "Is not this Joseph's son," is that a positive question to ask about Jesus, or is this a critical thing to ask? Critical. So here's a difficulty. How is it that we got from all spoke well of him and wondered, this word's actually the word for amazed, and amazed at the gracious words that proceeded from his mouth, and now we're negative? How did we get so quickly from positive to negative? Also a unique moment in history, right? This is the first time someone has showed up among the Jewish population, read something from the Old Testament that prophesied the Messiah and said, "I'm it." Okay, it's just been an amazing kind of a moment here. Okay. So it is true that all spoke well of him, but now that's going to change. So like many words in the Bible, it can be positive or negative depending on who's doing it. Remember, tempt or test. It's tempt if the devil's doing it because he's trying to ruin you. It's test if God's doing it because he's trying to preserve you. Love. So 4 Greek words for love. Agape means what kind of love? Have you heard of that? Unconditional love. Some people describe it as God's love. Yes. Unconditional. It's also self-sacrificial. So hold nothing back in providing for your life and well-being, having nothing to do with whether anybody thinks you're worth it or not. So that's the unconditional part, and it's all in, as you see Jesus giving his life. Okay. And yet the Bible says that the Pharisees loved money more than anything else. They loved the popularity and the prestige of being who they were in the marketplace and in the synagogues and so forth. So they also love something, but they're sacrificing their life in the wrong direction. Amazed can be good. Some people were amazed at the miracles that Jesus did. Jesus himself was amazed negatively at the unbelief of people on certain occasions. So the assumption when you read the text is that the people wondered or were amazed, positively speaking, but it's a negative amazement. Look at what they're amazed at. The gracious words. So what's this power structure in Jewish religion made out of? Where did the ruling Jews get their power from? Being gracious or holding people in their guilt? How do banks make their money? How do credit cards make their money? By forgiving debts? No, that's not how it works. Okay, so guess what? Somebody shows up and forgives all the debts. No, that's not going to fly because you just undid our whole power structure here. That's why they don't get it. Why is he forgiving everybody's debts and freeing them from this moralism that we've imposed upon them? And so now they're looking for a way to dismiss Jesus. So, okay, so he looks and acts like a rabbi, so maybe we should pay attention to him, but we don't want to pay attention to him because he is against our power structure, so we're going to find a way to get rid of them. So is not this Joseph's son? Now, what's Jesus going to do about that? So, Casey, please, verse 22. Oh, sorry, 23, you're right, 4:23.
And he said to them, doubtless you will quote me this proverb, physician, heal yourself. What we have heard you did at Capernaum, do here in your hometown as well.
Okay, so this is their rebuttal of Jesus, right? If you're such hot stuff, then let's see it, so to speak. And Ahmed, you can read it right off of here. Can you see? This will be easier than trying to find it here.
Yeah, and he said, verily I say to you, no prophet is acceptable in his own country.
Okay, back to you, Tammy, 25.
Of truth I tell you, there were many windows in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heavens were shut up 3 years and 6 months, when there came a great famine over all the land.
Parker.
Yet Elijah was not sent to any of them, but to a widow in Zarephath, in the region of Sidon.
Got to a woman who was a widow, Ross, 4:27.
And there were many lepers in Israel in the time of the prophet Elijah, and none of them was cleansed, but only Naaman the Syrian.
Okay, good. So the argument of the power structure, the religious Jewish power structure. So I'm using all those words to distinguish that from the Judaism of the Old Testament itself. So here we have a power structure. It depends on two things. One is it depends on me having control of everybody else. So you have to do what I say or you're in a lot of trouble. The second thing it has to do with is my self-concept, is that this is okay for me to treat you this way and to treat other people that way because God likes me better than you. Okay? Jesus knows that. He knows both things that are going on in the power structure. So what's he say? Okay, let's look at your own history, Jewish religious power structure people. In your own history, there were hundreds and hundreds of widows in Israel at the time of Elijah. None of them got any help. One widow did. Where was she from? He was from Sidon. So it's not just that she wasn't Jewish, but that was a place that the Jewish had particular contempt for, Sidon. Okay. Many lepers in Israel, the time of the prophet Elisha. So from Elijah to Elisha, not one of them was cleansed except this fellow. And where's he from? And it's worse. It's not just that he's from Syria. He was the commander of the king of Syria's army. And so, wait a minute. If God is for me and against everybody else, no matter what, then how come my widows aren't being healed historically? How come my lepers aren't being healed? Worse than that, other people are being provided for and other people are being healed. And those are the people that I hold in contempt. And Jesus just exploding these notions of how religion works, what God thinks about religion, and what God thinks about different people groups. What's their response to this? They all took hold of him, drug him out of the synagogue, headed for the edge of the city. There's a big cliff there. I've been there. You can visit there too if you like. They're going to pitch him off the cliff. Going to get rid of him right now. That's the way to deal with people you disagree with. Yes, you don't like something they say, and you just terminate them, right? No, but there it is. So that's the passionate, the negatively passionate side of the corruption in this nature. It's just so myopic in its perception of things. We just got to put an end to them. So why didn't they succeed? Pitch Jesus off the edge, pass through the midst of them. That'd be a weird experience too, wouldn't it? That we had him and then we didn't have him. Where did he go? I don't know. He passed through the midst of the crowd. Okay, did all that. So we're moving on. I think next we're going to chapter 9. Yeah, please. Okay, that's kind of important because it records the transfiguration of Jesus, which happens just before the last week of Jesus' life before he's crucified. Okay? So I mentioned this at the beginning of the semester, is that Matthew concentrates the narrative of Jesus' life and activity in Galilee. Why? Galilee of the Gentiles. So Matthew has one way of showing us what God's disposition is towards people and why. Luke that's already been written. So Luke's going to show us the narrative of Jesus' ministry in the last couple of weeks before the last week of his life. So he's down here in Judea. So he's in the right neighborhood according to this power structure. So now you're coming close to the heart of religious Judaism. But we're going to see that he keeps helping people we wouldn't expect him to help. They're going to show us in a different way. So let's pick up at 9 verse 28, please. And we are at, where are we? Yeah, Julie.
Now about 8 days after these sayings, he took with him Peter and John and James and went up on the mountain to pray. He had not seen his burden, and so the spirits of all the rivers flowing using them. And then Moses and Elijah appeared in glorious splendor, talking with Jesus.
Angela?
They spoke about his repentance, which he was about to put.
Gabriel? It's okay. We'll go ahead. Andrea, let me see.
I'm not sure.
9 verse 32.
But Peter and those with him were heavy with sleep, and when they were fully awake, they saw his glory, and 2 men who stood with him.
And as the men were parting from him, Peter said to Jesus, Master, it is good that we are here. Let us make 3 tents, one for you and one for Moses and one for Elijah. Not knowing what he said.
As he was saying these things, the cloud came and overshadowed them, and they were afraid as they entered the cloud.
And a voice came out of the cloud saying, "This is my son, my chosen one, listen to him."
Sonny?
And when the voice that spoken, Jesus was found alone, and they had kept silent and told no one to say anything else.
Okay, thank you. So this is known as the transfiguration of Jesus. That's actually Latin. So the Greek is a metamorphosis. Maybe in early science classes, you heard that word metamorphosis. used in referring to what? Frogs, right? From tadpole to frog. There's so it literally means a change of form. So on this occasion, Jesus' appearance changes. So from a divine nature wrapped in a human, so he sort of draws away the human nature so that you can see what's within this divine nature. Two people appear with him who? Moses and Elijah. Why? Why not Noah and Daniel? So Moses has in his hands what? The Ten Commandments. What has Jesus come to do? That's the law. He's going to fulfill the law on behalf of everybody. So there's no more reason to die because of the curse of not keeping the law. This is Elijah. He was first and most prominent of the prophets. So here's the problem, the law. Here's the solution, the promise of a substitute in the person of Jesus. And that's what happens next. He goes to Jerusalem and he completes that work. Peter, James, and John. Okay, why them? So the who of it is Moses and Elijah. The when of it is right before he goes to Jerusalem. This is sort of what it has to do with. As things go on the week before Jesus' crucifixion, is there more or less tension between Jesus and the religious establishment? More, okay, and the disciples of Jesus are expected to follow where he's leading, yes, okay. So how would you help the disciples know that the person you're following is someone that's safe to follow? Like, how is this going to go down? So before it gets really hard to follow Jesus, in fact, it became so hard anyway that they all ran away. So that tells us something about human nature. But he's going to show them actually visually who he is so that they have some basis upon which to hope, right? So this is going to be okay because this is God going through all this, and yet he's wrapped in human nature. So it sure doesn't look like he's winning when he's losing. Okay, a mountain, yes? Okay, so lots, like 40 days, a prominent number about lifespan in the Bible. Same thing, lots of important things happen on mountains. Where did God give Moses the Ten Commandments? Mount Sinai, yes? Where did Elijah demonstrate to the people by experiment that God is God and not Baals, idols? Mount Carmel. You can go to those places today and visit them. So also in this occasion, so God tends to reveal things to people in mountaintops. You may have heard people talk about having a mountaintop experience. Have you been on top of a mountain? Gives you perspective, yes? So when you might be in a valley and you'd be lost, and it might be dark and you might be afraid. If you can get to a high place, that changes. Yes, now I have perspective, I know where I am, we can move forward. So that's something else about Jesus showing kind of the apostles where they are in the grand scheme of things, and now things are going to get tougher and tougher. So picking it up at verse 51, 9 verse 51, and so yeah, it's kind of lean.
When the days drew near for him to be taken, he set his face to go to Jerusalem.
He sent messengers ahead of him who went and entered the village of the Samaritans to make separation for him.
But the people did not receive him because his face was set toward Jerusalem.
Chase?
When his disciples James and John saw it, they said, Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume it?
But he turned to him with them, and they went on to another village.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay. Where was Jesus headed? To Jerusalem. And what's going to happen to him there? Yeah, it's not going to be fun. It's going to be the climax of the difficulty of what he's come to do. If you have something difficult ahead of you, do you sometimes look for other things to do? Like you're supposed to be reading your book and writing a paper. I'll get to that. right? I do it too. I'd rather do things that I'd rather do than that sort of a thing, okay? So notice, Jesus is gonna stop at a village in Samaria and hunker down for a while, but the village won't receive him, yes? Okay. An easy interpretation of that would be, I'm having a bad day. People are rejecting me, this is a bad experience, I'm gonna feel sorry for myself. A different way of interpreting that is, somebody's helping me stay on course. The reason I stop and look at this narrative with you is because, have you ever felt disappointed because something didn't happen the way you thought you wanted it to happen? Is it possible that that is a means by which is God steering you to where he actually wants you to go? Oh, right. So I had a professor in grad school who was in his last game as a pitcher in college, last game pitching before he started his career in the major leagues. He already had a contract, Major League Baseball. I think that's an exciting, lucrative, money-filled future, right? In that last game, he threw his arm out. Guess what happened to his contract? Done. Guess what happened to his attitude about God? So mad, right? So disappointed. And it took another 12 years before he sort of figured out that there was something more important to him in life than baseball. And it turned out to be Hebrew. And so he went to Yale, got a PhD in Hebrew, and loved learning and teaching Hebrew and exploring the Old Testament and seeing what that's all about. So this model gives you two different ways of seeing things. Yeah, I get how it looks on the surface and I get how it feels on the surface. But I also understand that there's something else greater at work. And sometimes it takes some steering me from one direction into another direction. And you can apply this all the time. Is a traffic jam necessarily against you? One of the things you can learn to like in the Los Angeles area is driving slowly on highways, right? Because there's more reaction time. It's kind of peaceful, right? You just have to realize that I'm not going to get where I thought I was going to get when I thought I was going to get there. There's a lot of that in life too, right? Okay, thanks for your attention, and I'll see you on Friday. Hey, good.
On Friday, there's a slight chance I won't be in class. I'm just trying to be appointment.
Sure. Yeah,
It was like scheduled 6 months ago. I just realized.
yeah, we're recording, so okay, we're in good place.
I'm trying to move it.
Yeah.
Because if I don't, I'm missing my.
I get it. No, I don't want you to miss that. Yeah,
I will not be here Friday.
you got something going on,
Yeah, I have a funeral to go to.
a funeral. Okay,